Right, our next speaker is Justin. Justin is from Discovery Vitality. He's going to speak to us about high-stakes planning poker. Justin tells me that he is very passionate about building high-quality products and having whole teams involved in building high-quality products. I asked Justin about what's interesting about him that he might want to share with you, and he tells me that he's got a 3-week-old new baby boy.
Don't clap, it's her.
So please help me welcome Justin.
Thanks, everyone. Yeah. Here I thought afternoon session, everyone would be going home already, empty room, wouldn't have to stress, but there's a lot more people than I thought. So, yeah, no stress, everything's fine. And so obviously as mentioned, 3-week-old baby, so it wasn't the best night last night, so if I take a little bit of a moment to reply to a question, or I stare at you a bit glazed, just give me a chance. I'll get there. I'll be all right. We'll make it through this. When I submitted this a couple of months back, I thought it was a good idea at the time. Right now, we'll see how it goes. Yeah. Right. So I'm here to chat to you guys today about.
Before you proceed, how is the sound? Are you hearing Justin properly? Fine. Thank you.
Can you hear me in the back there? Oh, shout louder. All right. Right, so I'm here to chat to you guys today about a relative sizing technique that we've implemented at our portfolio level in Vitality RSA, just to give you some ideas of an alternative approach that we've taken there. So for those of you who have possibly been involved in portfolio level prioritization sessions or planning sessions, this kind of scene might be familiar to you. It's a very interesting affair, lots of arguments and people with different opinions all shouting and vying, well, hopefully not shouting, but vying for their piece of the pie and to get their points across. There's people that are just sort of trying to keep their heads down and not get involved. And generally it's not a very effective or productive kind of a process, and we generally see it sort of getting bogged down by all these different arguments and different opinions that are coming through. And I think I have to say, I think I've felt like that guy in the middle there, sort of zen once or twice in my time before. You just have to sort of breathe deeply and hope that everyone sort of aligns up, and we get somewhere by the end. So typically this is how we've seen some of the prioritization sessions, at least in our environment, go. So after one or two of these sessions, we thought maybe there's a better way that we could do this, we'll try to tackle this problem, and we tried to experiment with different approaches. We'll come to that now. So let's just talk about a little bit about the challenges and why this is happening. So at the portfolio level, you're generally dealing with a lot of your executives that are coming in and trying to give sort of strategic direction in terms of what are the main projects or programs that we want to work on. So obviously these are high-powered, type A, opinionated individuals. So that's pretty challenging as it is. You know, everyone, lots of ideas and very opinionated. And these execs all come from different areas in terms of the business. They have different focus areas. So you've got people like maybe the COO and the CFO looking at sort of operations aspects and cost cutting, how we can make things more efficient. You've maybe got your head of R&D off on the other side with their amazing blue sky ideas that they want to sort of go on about. And maybe you've got the CIO off on the side there with a little bit of an architectural initiative that he's trying to sort of slip in, hopefully no one sort of notices. So there's a lot of different people, a lot of different opinions, and lots of different sort of objectives and agendas that these people are sort of all going in different directions with. The problem is they're dealing with usually a centralized single capacity of work or sort of systems capacity to now go and engage with these different projects. So that means all these different people with their different ideas and agendas are sort of all vying for a bit of time with a single capacity. And no one wants to sort of say, look, it's okay, you go, I'll wait. Because usually if that person waits, it means they have to wait 6 months or a year before they get another chance to maybe get on. So there's very infrequent prioritization that's occurring. And that basically means that you end up with everything's important. No one wants to back down. No one wants to sort of say, okay, look, you go first or anything. And you end up with these lists of 50 priority one projects, and we're all supposed to somehow engage with these things. So those are some of the challenges that we've encountered, at least, and some of the reasons why we think we're sort of getting into that. So what we did to try to address this or find a better way or to bring something in that added a bit more structure to the process was to play around with this weighted shortest job first prioritization technique. So this is a technique that Donald Reyneson's come up with. He speaks about it in his book, Principles of Product Development Flow. And basically, I'm going to take you now through a little bit of the details around this weighted shortest job first prioritization, how it works, and then lead you into how we've applied it in our space to help with that portfolio level prioritization and some of the benefits that we've seen from that. So broadly speaking, Reyneson talks about two main criteria that you should consider when thinking about prioritization. So the first thing, cost of delay. So that's sort of a fancy term. You can just sort of think about that as sort of the value of this particular product or project that we're looking at. So thinking about the value of the project, and then also thinking about the job size. How big is this thing? And trying to find a ratio between those things. So we'll have a look at the formula in a bit more detail, but very, very broadly, what we've got, every time I try to talk away. So very broadly, there's a couple of criteria that I'm going to take you to in more detail now. User value, time criticality, risk reduction, opportunity enablement, those sort of broadly grouped together in terms of cost of delay, or sort of overall value, and then the size of the job that we're dealing with. All right, so just to give a little bit of sort of background why we would want to do this thing. So if we're dealing with, the theory that Reyneson puts forward is, just to give a little bit of context in terms of why we look at the weighted shortest job first. So if we're dealing with a number of projects that all have the same cost of delay or the same value, in those kind of instances, we want to try focus on the projects that have the shortest time, the smallest job size, so that we can realize that value as fast as possible. So if you have a look at that little table over there, you'll see all the cost of delays are 3. They've put those things down there, but very different durations. So one duration of 1, one of 3, and one of 20 at 10. So obviously out of those things, if they're all valued at 3, don't worry about what 3 is, it's just a number right now. Then we're going to tackle the one that has the smallest size, so that number 1. That's the one where we want to start. So if you have a look at the black area in terms of the graphs over there, we want that black area to be as small as possible, so we're sort of realizing value as fast as possible. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Same value, do the smallest one first. Okay. If, however, we're dealing with projects or products of differing value, but they happen to have the same size, so they're all about the same amount of effort, then we're going to target the one with the highest value, obviously. We want to get the one that's going to give us the biggest bang for our buck, because we're spending the same amount of time on it. There's no sense in building the one with the longest time, because it just takes us longer to realize that value. And if we do build the one with the longest time, it just delays all the other ones for the same amount of value that we're delivering there. So again, pretty straightforward. If it's the same time, do the one with the biggest bang for the buck, biggest value that you get out of it. So those are nice and easy. However, generally in reality, you generally don't come across most projects that have exactly the same size or exactly the same value. Every project is different. There's different values and different sizes of each of the different projects, and obviously that complicates things. And what Reyneson puts forward in this particular instance is to then try to look for the projects with the best ratio between value and size. So trying to find something that essentially is sort of the most valuable project with the smallest size, kind of, in a way. And he's sort of created this formula, the value divided by the job size, which gives you that ratio. So it's a technique that we can apply. So if we have a look at the numbers that we've got over there, so we've got a project with a duration of 1 and a value of 10, and we've got a project with a duration of 10 and a value of 1. Obviously, we want to do the one with the most value, 10, and the smallest size, 1. That's going to give us our best bang for our buck, the best ratio between those things. Okay, so that's very broadly what the formula is trying to do, and it's just a pretty handy little prioritization technique. I'm going to take you into what those individual criteria are, just explain those in a bit more detail, and then we'll get into how we actually apply this. Okay, so the first thing that when we're looking at that top line, cost of delay, or the value part of it, he talks about 3 different components. So the first one, user value or business value. So this is basically the potential value as perceived by the organization to either our users or our members, or otherwise the value of this particular product or project to the actual business. How we're going to make money, or how people are actually going to find value in terms of this product that we're building. Okay, so that's quantified. Then the next cost of delay item, time criticality. So how does that value decay over time? So basically, we're looking at is there a deadline or point by which if we miss a particular deadline, we're going to lose that value? So example from my world, we've recently just launched a new food switch app thing. You can go scan barcode and it tells you how healthy it is and recommends alternatives. And we synchronized that with a big Vitality Health Summit that was run a couple of weeks back. And that for us had a very good sort of delivery of value. So if we could sort of launch this new product at the same time of that summit, it's connected to that, it has a good platform, there's a lot of PR around that, so that the value that we're realizing from this product is that much higher. Had we missed that particular point in time, maybe we wouldn't have gotten as much value from the product, it wouldn't have been as effective necessarily. So there was some business value in terms of that time criticality, and we probably would have decayed the value we would have gotten from it if we didn't hit that particular mark. All right, and then finally, in terms of cost of delay, we're looking at risk reduction or / opportunity enablement. So we look at these two things together. And this is basically just sort of, so risk reduction, we're talking about how does this product or project that we're going to deliver actually reduce risk to the business. So a good example of this is legislation. So, we've got things like POPI coming up. We have to become POPI compliant. If we don't, could put the business at risk. So, this is something important that we have to do. So it's going to reduce risk to the business. Okay, fine, let's go do that. Or opportunity enablement. How does this product actually open up doorways to other opportunities or other products that we could build? How is it a gateway into innovating further? So a good example from our world again is, so we've created like a global device layer, which is sort of a unified interface through which we can integrate with various fitness devices. That was important because now that we have this interface, we can now easily and rapidly integrate with other fitness devices that haven't even been invented yet or launched yet. So it's opened up an opportunity for integrating with more devices and integrating rapidly with those devices. So that was a good gateway project for us to move into other opportunities. All right, so those three things together, user value, business value, time criticality, risk reduction, opportunity enablement, those three things together forming our value prospect. And then finally, job size. What's the effort and complexity involved to actually deliver this thing? How big is this thing? Are we talking months worth of work, or are we talking like a day or two? How rapidly can we deliver this thing to realize the value? So, t-shirt sizes, things, small, medium, large, something like that. Okay. So that's very broadly the weighted shortest job formula, how it all sits together, what the different criteria are. And then we've taken that formula and we've applied normal relative sizing techniques. So like your teams do with their planning poker stuff when we're sizing user stories or features, we've taken that same kind of approach and applied it to each of the different criteria. So we've identified a reference project or a reference product for each of the different criteria. User value, time criticality, something in a midpoint that we can compare against. And then using normal planning poker card decks, we've used relative sizing on each of those criteria when we're looking at a project to then vote the order of magnitude compared against this reference point. Is it sort of the same as the reference project that we're talking about? Is it more time critical or less time critical, or does it reduce risk or more than the reference point? And people use the planning poker cards to vote using this formula then. Right, so just some examples of what that then looks like. So first example over there, we've got a couple of things that have been sized coming out over overall cost of delay of 26. So so cost of delay is 26, but it's a really massive project. They voted it as a 20. So overall, weighted shortest job first sizing is coming out as 1.3. However, if we look at the last column, we're seeing something with the same cost of delay, but a much smaller job size. So 26 in cost of delay, job size of 3, and that comes out as a weighted shortest job size of 13. So that's our priority 1. The other one is actually our lowest priority because of that ratio between value and job size. All right, so hopefully that's making a certain amount of sense. It's a little bit theoretical, but once people get on top of that, they feel relatively comfortable with that. So how did we apply this in terms of our context? So for the next prioritization session where we introduced this, we did a couple of things. So we asked firstly that each executive go and identify what was their top priority, top 5 items that they felt were really critical for the business to look at next. So obviously we had a list of 100 different projects and initiatives. It was just too much stuff to think about and look at. So we tried to sort of do a little bit of pre-filtering and get them to think about, okay, you know, if I could just have 5 things, these are definitely it. And then across the various executives, that worked out to about 20, 30 different projects that we were looking at and talking about. So each one of those executives coming to the session, handed them a deck of planning poker cards, quickly went through how relative sizing works and how the formula works, weighted shortest job first prioritization, agreed reference points for each of the different criteria that make up the formula, and made sure everyone understood, you know, this is the midpoint for time criticality and this is the midpoint for job size. And then basically in a round robin fashion, got each executive then to present from their top priority P1 items to the rest of the group what this project was about. And then we sort of just went through each executive, priority 1, priority 2, and everyone voted on everyone else's projects. We obviously time boxed this very tightly, really put them under a lot of time pressure, moved them along very quickly, and I'll show you in the next slide sort of broadly what we were doing in terms of the actual voting process. And we try to establish this voting process on a very regular basis, so at least once a month, getting all these people to come together, relook the priorities, represent if there was a new priority that came in, so we were constantly looking at the right things and reprioritizing based on that. In terms of the voting process that we implemented, so we kept it a little bit more lightweight than your typical team sort of thing, but it's kind of the same kind of process. So the particular exec would present their project, give a quick overview of what this project was about, and then we would go into rounds of voting per criteria. We would generally keep it to 2 rounds of voting, so obviously everyone, here's what the project's about. We say, okay, user value, everyone select your size, everyone sizes, pick the high and the low scores in the room, get them to present arguments about why they think it's particularly valuable or not so valuable, have a little bit of a discussion around that, get into a second round of voting, and then hopefully we start to see stabilization and agreement. But in order to keep things moving, if we didn't see that, executives don't want to sit there for ages re-voting, so we generally then just took an average if we weren't seeing a clear front runner coming out of that process. And we basically just did that, present project, 2 rounds of voting for each of the different criteria, user value, time criticality, risk reduction, job size. And we time boxed this to about 3 minutes per criteria. So we were working at about 15 minutes a project, and then we started to push them down to 2 minutes per section, so down to 10 minutes a project. So it was a really intensive session. First time we ran this was a whole day session, and we think we got through about 40, 50 projects. Previous time they'd done a full day session, they maybe got through 4. So it was a substantial, we were able to engage with a lot more projects, quickly size those things and see what emerged as the clear priorities and front runners that came out of that. So benefits in terms of the organization, what we found were really helped in terms of taking this approach. So obviously the session's far more focused, productive, prioritization sessions, everyone really staying focused on what's going on, a lot less checking out on phones and stuff like that. Execs are notorious for that, because we're putting them under so much time pressure, there wasn't really opportunity for them to do that, so they stayed quite focused. It was a fair and objective process, so this really came through. The people felt this was really helped a lot. It removed a lot of the personal agendas and personal opinions, and because everyone was voting on everyone else's stuff, it created a much more fair and objective level playing field, that everyone could come, present their project, and if they could convince everyone else that this was the right thing to do, that was the direction that we were going to take. So it helped to remove a lot of those personal objectives and agendas and arguments that were coming out. Highly collaborative. So previously we'd seen that a lot of executives were just checking out when it wasn't their project, where they weren't interested, whereas now everyone has to vote on everyone else's. They're asking questions, they're participating in terms of that, so much more collaborative, getting everyone sort of thinking about what are the different areas, what does ops need, what does finance need, how does that align with our strategic vision, so getting everyone to think about what are all the different projects there, as opposed to these just disappearing into the woodwork and just sort of saying yes, everything's important. And then because we're doing this far more regularly, we have a much better chance of always working on the right kind of stuff. We're reprioritizing constantly, making sure that we're focusing on the right things based on changing requirements or changing market conditions, whatever it happens to be that influenced what the new priorities were. So those were, in terms of the portfolio level prioritization, some real tangible benefits that we've got out of this. And what was very interesting is then we saw that this approach sort of really caught on. People really liked this idea. And it's actually spread across the division and the organization quite substantially now, to the point where basically if we're in a situation where there's a single capacity, a single team, and multiple people that need anything from that particular team or capacity, this is starting to become the de facto way that we're actually dealing with trying to create objective, fair prioritization across those different views and across those different priorities across stakeholders. So we see it a lot in our BAU space and our BAU business as usual teams, where we've got call center people coming in and ops people and some business people that need updates to websites, whatever it happens to be. They're all vying for a single. We've got a single BAU team that does all these little small chunks of work. So rather than everyone fighting with each other, they now come and bring their chunks of work, present it in the same kind of fashion, vote on everyone else's stuff, and then that becomes the priority that we take through to the team. And the team never has to worry about people shouting at them. They just go then and deliver on that priority that emerges in that session. So it's caught on, and we've seen it applied in a variety of areas. So not at a portfolio level, even down at a single team level, it's been quite effective. Right, so that's very broadly what we've done with portfolio prioritization. So any questions on that? Have I stunned you with theory? And right, we've got some questions back there.
How's So I wanted to just ask two things. Firstly is, I guess you have to have quite a broad range of people in that meeting, particularly looking at the above the line stuff versus under the line stuff, because a lot of the stuff that comes in at the bottom, you actually need developers and testers and to really get a good feel for the size of that thing. So I wanted to know how you deal with that. You're sitting with execs and talking about sizing things, I think.
Yeah. So it is a little bit tough. I mean, the sizing that we're doing in those portfolio sessions, it's again just a relative gut feel. We're just sort of going, okay, yeah, this project is kind of like the food switch thing that we just did. It's kind of about that kind of work, or it's going to be a lot more complicated, or no, this one's really quick and easy. We're not really worried about that. So we'll have some development representation there. We'll have some architects and dev managers and the CIO and people like that giving their opinion. But when we actually then do go into actual delivery of the project, then it still goes into the normal process, break up the backlog, size all that, and that's when your devs and testers and everyone else gets involved with that.
Sure. I mean, if that fundamentally changes a number, what do you do in that kind of scenario?
Well, that's the reality. It's probably going to happen one way or another. So at least what we maybe have managed to establish is that there's a certain constraint.
Yeah.
We've sort of said, okay, if this project is sort of roughly about this amount of time, 3 months or 6 months, whatever it has to be, and we think we can get this kind of value out of it, then yeah, we're up for the game. However, as the teams start to engage and we start to see a whole lot of stuff emerge and our estimates are way out, then that's immediately a checkpoint for us to sort of go back into a viability discussion and sort of say, well, we've actually learned out of our creation of the backlog and story mapping processes that this thing is actually substantially bigger. Are you still up for the game? Do you still want to continue? It's now going to be a year as opposed to 6 months. Should we continue? And if not, that's great. Then we can stop right there, go back to the drawing board, rediscuss, or we can still work within those constraints. So often the execs will come back and say, look, I don't care. You've got 6 months. You have to build something within that. And then that actually tends to force the sort of minimum viable product, as it were, of that particular thing that we're building to sort of emerge. It forces people to get really critical around, is this really vital for us to build this thing? Could we deliver it in different releases, in multiple releases, as opposed to waiting 6 months for this whole thing? So there's a lot of good discussions that can come out of that as well.
Cool. And then the other thing I wanted to know was, how long have you been doing this, and how have you found the executive buy-in into this sort of being your de facto prioritization process, and are people buying into it? Are they realizing this is a good way to work, and how long have you been doing it?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so we've been doing it from about February this year, so most of the year so far. And yeah, the response has been absolutely great. The execs have really bought into it. I think the level of productivity and the pace at which we're able to work and get through things is just so much more than we were getting out of the previous sessions, where we were constantly getting bottled down into big discussions and lots of fights and stuff like that. So I think everyone's seen a real value out of that, and I think they appreciate the objectiveness of it, the fairness of it. So because of those things, it's basically been every month since February that we've gotten them there, and the response has been very positive. Yeah.
Hey Justin, have you ever deprioritized projects that are in flight?
Yes, we have actually done that. Yeah, it doesn't happen often. Usually, there's always we have to make a plan, we have to make this work. But yeah, we have actually done one or two where we just sort of start to realize either we don't really know what this product is, we still have to figure it out more. There's still more work that needs to be done, or it's just become so much more involved or massive than we anticipated, and the decision was made rather to put that aside to focus on other things. So it has occurred, not as regular as I would have liked. Hopefully we'll see that happening more and more. Yeah.
Thank you. He's coming around. Okay, we've got about 5 minutes, so I think we'll take a good 2 or 3 more questions.
I've got a question. One of the slides where you were talking about the averaging, what was the output there? Was that a kind of a financial estimate, or hours, or what?
Just a relative sizing. So it's the same like we do with normal planning poker sort of thing. So it's just a Fibonacci numbering sequence, sort of giving you an order of magnitude, double the size, triple the size. Financials might be involved as part of the presentation. So, you know, the CFO will come and say, I think we should really do this project. We're getting this number of calls every month, and it's wasting our operations time by X, and if we can do this, it's going to reduce our costs. But those arguments, those numbers will then factor into the relative size, which will then probably push up the business value score that people will give it.
Okay, and then is there any attempt made to try and track the actual experience on the project to see how it relates to that estimate?
Yeah, we're working on that at this point in time. So one of the tricky areas, or one of the areas we need a lot more work on, is just the whole business case concept. So really trying to put a bit more thought into, what's the ROI, what is the perceived value that we're going to get out of this. So in those sessions, it's more just around, yes, we think this is the right thing to do. These are the top things that are coming out. But then, from there, we actually want to have a lot more tangible business case, return on investment, things that we can go back and track once we've actually delivered this thing. So I won't tell you that we're doing really great on that, but we're trying to get that more and more in place as we go along.
We need it for the sound, for the recording.
If you've already done your prioritization at that workshop and you've defined exactly how big it is, do you ever go back and embarrassing me and go and check where you're wrong and where were you wrong, and go and do like a root cause analysis?
Not hugely at this point in time. It's usually deliver it, get it out, move on to the next thing. But as I was sort of saying, we definitely want to start doing more in terms of our business cases and ROI. To try see what people were saying, what is the value that they perceive, and did we actually realize that? But again, I wouldn't say it's something that we're very mature at this point. Yeah.
Hi, Justin. Does your prioritization approach assume that you have people allocated full-time to projects? Or in a situation where you have the same people working on projects also doing production support, how does it affect your approach on prioritization?
So it shouldn't affect the prioritization approach that much, because still fundamentally, whether people are working on other things or not, this project will still have, or product will still have a certain amount of value, still have a certain amount of time criticality, will still reduce risk and open up opportunities to a certain level, and there'll still be a certain amount of work that's occurring. The work might, if your teams are not focused and dedicated, the work will probably get stretched out and take longer. But overall, there's a quantified amount of work, be it 6 months of work that needs to occur, that 6 months could occur over a year if the people are really context switching. But theoretically, your job size isn't actually changing from that perspective. So from a prioritization technique, it should still be fine. That's more than your actual delivery. And it's up to your organization to decide, do they want to get stuff out fast and realize the value from that? Or do they want to do a whole lot of things simultaneously and do those things really slowly? So one of the other things I did want to talk about, but I didn't include it from a time perspective, is work in progress limits. So that's obviously the next most important thing, because you can apply this technique but still come up with 50 priority items that business wants to do. They need to understand. So this technique will help to order, but you still need something that says, okay, let's just concentrate on the top 5. That's all we can do. We only have 5 dedicated teams or whatever it happens to be that we can engage with any projects at one time with. Those are as much as we can do right now. Let's get those things done, and then we'll pick up the next thing. So trying to create a single product flow kind of delivery as opposed to lots of work in progress that moves really slow. So that's a different challenge.
We'll take one more.
Hi, so quick question. So the outcome of the calculations and so on determines priority on the projects. And there's many mechanisms to prioritize, and this is a good one. Have you guys come up with any mechanisms to validate the input? You know, it's amazing how many of our projects suddenly have a regulatory requirement or a $1 trillion opportunity.
Sorry, I think I missed a little bit.
So the attributes, the input that the executives would give to the formula.
Yeah.
Have you guys come up with any mechanisms to validate that? Triangulation is one mechanism, or some way to figure out that there's no real regulatory requirement here, or the opportunity is not as big as stated? Because, you know, otherwise you get group thinking, right? You know, one executive will override the game and continuously win, and then prioritization doesn't count anymore.
Yeah, so I think we've had a couple of questions around actually trying to validate that. Possibly, I think you're talking about even before we start to deliver, trying to validate that in some kind of way. So I suppose most of the validations occur more from when we actually start to engage with our products and we do sort of product planning workshops and we emerge what this product is about. We start to sort of get an indication of order of the size of this thing and how much time and money it's probably going to cost. So there's some validation from that perspective. In terms of the actual ROI and delivery and validating that we're actually going to make the money that we think with this particular thing, or have the membership uptake that we think, or whatever it happens to be, that's pretty tough. We haven't really come up with a great way to do that. So it is still a little bit of on assumption. It's up to those executives or R&D teams to sort of do their research and come up with some figures that they think is the right answers to why this thing is so important. And usually you can only answer those questions retrospectively once you've built this thing and delivered it and actually seen how it's done in market, which is a great argument for, again, trying to build minimum viable products. So don't build the whole, Ferrari, let's build a little station wagon, little Volkswagen, and get that out, see how it does in market, learn from that, and then build on that once we've actually seen that people want to build it. So to be honest, I'm a great supporter of lean startup kind of principles, experimenting, using validated data on your products that you build. I think that's the really only way you can come up with good products. I'll figure that out.
All right, thank you, Justin. Would you help me please just thank Justin for the talk? Thanks very much once again.
Sorry, and then just one last thing. Here's a couple of references. So obviously, Donald Robinson's book, Product Development Flow, and then a couple of links to SAFE website that actually goes into this formula and approach in a little bit more detail. Cool. Thanks very much.
Okay, just quick announcements, guys.